Iran is sending a message, not through diplomats, not through back channels, through sea mines, suicide boats, and a coastline rig to kill anything that gets close. The Strait of Hormuz, the narrow passage that carries 20% of the world's oil, has been turned into a kill zone. And Iran's calculation was simple. No navy on earth would be willing to enter it. Washington didn't agree. Instead of pulling back, the United States activated something far more serious than an airstrike campaign. What's assembling on the horizon right now isn't a show of force. It's the infrastructure of a ground war. Massive warships, paratroopers, F-35S, A-10S Apache helicopters, tens of thousands of troops quietly moving into position. And Iran, which thought the minefield would stop all of this, may have just made the most consequential miscalculation of this entire conflict. Let's start with what's already moving. 12 A-10 Thunderbolt II attack aircraft have been transferred from Bangor Air Base to RAF Lakenheath in the United Kingdom, supported by aerial refueling tankers to keep them operational across the distance. The A-10 isn't a precision strike aircraft. It's a ground support weapon, built to destroy armor, suppress enemy positions, and keep troops alive during a surface assault. Moving 12 of them to a forward position in the UK isn't a defensive measure. It's preparation for something that happens on the ground. But here's where it gets serious. Because the A-10S are just the visible edge of what's being assembled. The Pentagon has already drafted plans for a potential ground operation targeting Iranian territory. On the night of March 26th, the Wall Street Journal published a report that stopped analysts in their tracks. The US military is preparing to deploy an additional 10,000 troops to the Middle East under an emergency order. And the unit at the center of this deployment is the 82nd Airborne Division, which arrived in the Middle East last weekend. Hundreds of special operations personnel are also en route. Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, units that don't deploy for deterrence. They deploy for action. Now, here's the number that matters most. That 10,000 strong reinforcement force, it's not the main event. It's the leading wave. Because the United States already has 50,000 troops fully deployed and combat ready in the Middle East. Add the Marine and airborne units, bringing the count towards 17,000. And the total force approaches 67,000 personnel. 67,000. That is the largest American military presence in the Middle East as of the final days of March 2026. But before you absorb that number, there's a detail about the timing that demands attention. Because the timing of this announcement is not accidental. President Trump publicly suspended strikes against Iran for 10 days. The world read that as a diplomatic signal, a pause, a possible off-ramp. And then, at that exact moment, the Pentagon announced the deployment of 10,000 additional troops. A country genuinely preparing for negotiations does not simultaneously flood a region with its most capable assault units, which means this 10-day window is something else entirely. It could be the last real opportunity for a diplomatic resolution. Or it could be the final preparation window before one of the largest ground operations in Middle Eastern history. The Pentagon's message is direct, even if it's unspoken. If diplomacy fails, we are already inside the door. The maritime picture makes this even clearer. The USS Tripoli amphibious assault ship is already in the region, carrying the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit. The USS Boxer amphibious assault ship is moving toward the theater, carrying the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit. Add paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne, and you are looking at more than 7,000 troops with full amphibious landing and airborne insertion capability positioned within hours of Iran's coastline. And this force isn't just soldiers on ships. Every Marine Corps unit arrives with its own organic air cover, its own armored vehicles, and its own battlefield intelligence systems. MV-22 Osprey tiltrotor aircraft can move hundreds of troops from ship to shore in minutes. CH-53E Super Stallion helicopters can transfer heavy equipment directly from deck to beach. LCAC hovercraft can land armored vehicles on the shoreline without a port facility. This is one of the most complete amphibious landing packages assembled in the modern era. The question is no longer whether the capability exists. The question is what it's pointing at. And military analysts agree on the answer. Kharg Island. This small island in the Persian Gulf, handles 90% of Iran's crude oil exports. Everything Iran sells to the world flows through this one point. The United States has already struck Kharg Island as part of Operation Epic Fury, using B-2 Spirit stealth bombers, F-35S, and Tomahawk cruise missiles to destroy over 90 military targets. Radar stations, missile silos, command centers, all leveled. But here's what wasn't touched. The oil infrastructure was left completely intact. Trump said it himself. We showed restraint. There is no guarantee that restraint survives the next phase. And Iran is not treating Kharg Island as a fixed target waiting to be taken. According to CNN's most recent reporting, Iran has been conducting intensive fortification work on the island for weeks. Additional air defense batteries have been moved in. Coastal defense missile systems, the Khalij, Fars, and Hormuz, too have been repositioned to the island, and the surrounding waters have been heavily mined. But analysts are now discussing something far more alarming than the defenses themselves. Iran may be preparing a scorched earth contingency, a plan to destroy its own oil infrastructure before it can be captured, ensuring that even if the island falls, it becomes worthless to whoever takes it. That scenario would be catastrophic for global energy markets. And it tells you exactly how seriously Tehran is treating the possibility of losing Kharg. But Kharg is only the first layer of the strategic picture. Military planners aren't just looking at one island. The operational framework being discussed involves multiple simultaneous objectives. Lavan Island, Siri Island, Keshem Island. Each one a critical node in Iran's logistics and military infrastructure across the Persian Gulf. Keshem is the most significant. It sits directly across from the Strait of Hormuz. Whoever controls Kesh controls the choke point. And according to analysis from the Center for Strategic and International Studies, the US already has the capability to conduct simultaneous amphibious landings across these islands using the platforms currently staged in the region. The sequence, based on doctrinal planning, would likely begin in darkness. Delta Force and the 75th Ranger Regiment infiltrating by helicopter, flying low, evading radar, MH-6 Little Birds and MH-60 Blackhawks approaching at terrain-hugging altitude. The first objective: neutralize air defense systems before a single Marine reaches the beach. Because the moment radar stations and missile batteries go silent, the island's gates open. Then the Marines move in. MV-22 Ospreys, delivering assault elements to multiple points simultaneously. Splitting the defense, isolating resistance pockets, creating confusion faster than the defenders can respond. The 82nd Airborne layers on top C-17 and C-130 aircraft, dropping paratroopers onto oil terminals, port facilities, and communication centers. Above all of it, F-35Bs providing continuous close air support. AH-6-4E Apache attack helicopters clearing fortified positions. EA-1, 8G Growler, electronic warfare aircraft, jamming every Iranian radar and communication frequency simultaneously. Under favorable conditions, this entire operation could be complete within 24 to 48 hours. But Iran is not sitting in a fixed defense waiting to absorb it. Tehran has spent months turning the Strait of Hormuz into something that resembles a trap more than a waterway. Dense minefields at the strait's narrowest point. Fast attack boats running continuous patrols. Drone swarm capabilities positioned and ready. Coastal missile batteries keeping every vessel transiting the strait within range. If a US ground operation begins, Iran's first and most immediate response would be to close the strait completely. 20 million barrels of oil per day stopped. That's not a supply disruption. That is an earthquake for global energy markets. And it's not Iran's only pressure point. Pull back and look at the full picture. Because the Marines and paratroopers staging near the coastline are, as we established, only the front edge of what's been assembled. Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar is CENTCOM's primary air operations hub in the region, running both command functions and heavy bombing missions simultaneously. Al Dhafra Air Base in the UAE is operating F-35 strike packages and continuous unmanned aerial vehicle surveillance. The U.S. Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain is coordinating naval operations across the theater. Ground and logistics support units are staged in Jordan. At Nevatim Air Base in Israel, intelligence integration and F-35 sustainment operations are ongoing. Approximately 3,000 troops redeployed from the Fifth Corps in Europe have already repositioned to the Middle East. Even assets from the Seventh Fleet in the Pacific have been redirected. This is a total commitment. 70,000 personnel, multiple carrier groups, the full weight of American power generation, not staged for deterrence, but postured for action. And once Trump's 10-day window closes, this entire machine can reach full operational readiness within 24 to 48 hours. The target sequencing beyond the islands is what reveals the true scale of what's being contemplated. Bandar Abbas, Iran's largest naval base, the headquarters of its naval command, the home port of its fast attack boats, its submarines, and its mine-laying vessels. Controlling Bandar Abbas means controlling the southern approach to the strait. Neutralizing its coastal batteries and naval infrastructure is a prerequisite for reopening Hormuz to global shipping. But Bandar Abbas sits on the Iranian mainland, inside a city with a dense civilian population. That makes any operation there exponentially more complex than taking an island. Bushehr compounds the problem further. A strategic coastal city housing one of Iran's active nuclear facilities. Any military action in that area carries implications that extend well beyond conventional warfare, both in terms of physical nuclear risk and the international response such an operation would trigger. These aren't targets being discussed lightly, but with 65,000 troops in the theater, analysts are no longer ruling them out. Iran understands it cannot win a conventional engagement. American air superiority, naval reach, and technological advantage create a mismatch that Iran has no realistic path to overcome in a straight fight. So Iran isn't planning a straight fight. The doctrine is asymmetric, layered, designed to raise the cost of winning rather than prevent defeat. Drone swarms overwhelming US point defense systems. Stopping one is manageable. Stopping dozens simultaneously is a different problem entirely. Ballistic missile strikes against US bases throughout the region, Al Udeid, Al Dhafra. Every major installation sits within range of Iranian missile systems. If a ground operation begins, another mass missile attack against those bases is not a contingency. It's a near certainty. And then the proxy network activates. Hezbollah, the Houthis, aligned militia groups across Iraq and Syria. This isn't a single front war from Iran's perspective. The strategy is to pull the United States into simultaneous engagements across multiple theaters, stretching logistics, degrading response time, and making the cost of staying far higher than the cost of leaving. Iran's goal is not to defeat the United States militarily. It is to break Washington's willingness to keep paying the price. The United States has built its force posture specifically to counter this threat structure. THAAD air defense batteries in Israel are oriented against the ballistic missile threat. U.S. destroyers positioned across the Red Sea are configured to counter Houthi drone and missile attacks. Each defensive layer is designed to insulate the main assault force, allowing ground operations to proceed even while Iran activates its proxy network. But the honest assessment is that this calculus is not clean. If Kharg Island is captured and held, Iran's oil revenue stops. The regime's ability to fund the war, its missiles, its proxy forces, its entire military machine depends on that revenue stream. Cut it, and the machine begins to starve. But the global consequences run in parallel. Oil prices crossing $150 per barrel, with some analysts already placing the ceiling at $200. China and India, Iran's largest oil customers, facing immediate energy shortfalls. European economies absorbing the downstream shock. Every country on Earth that imports energy feeling the pressure simultaneously. This is not a regional military operation with contained consequences. This is a move that reshapes the global economy, and every government in the world is watching the 10-day clock with that understanding. Iran has been trying to change that calculation by pursuing external support. But according to Al Jazeera sources, the responses from Moscow and Beijing have been measured at best. Russia cannot redirect meaningful military capability to the Middle East while absorbing the demands of the Ukraine conflict. China is not willing to risk direct military confrontation with the United States, preferring diplomatic posture to operational commitment. Iran is entering this potential confrontation without a credible external military backstop. And that isolation is forcing Tehran into a corner where its only viable strategy is deterrence through cost imposition, making the US operation so expensive, so bloody, and so prolonged that Washington concludes the price isn't worth the objective. According to analysis from the Long War Journal, Kharg Island may be precisely the kind of trap Iran has been engineering, capturing the island almost certain, holding it an entirely different problem. Positioned 20 miles off the Iranian mainland, a garrison on Kharg would be under continuous missile and drone pressure indefinitely. Defending what's been taken will consume far more resources than taking it required. This is the war of attrition Iran is preparing for. Not a decisive battle, a slow bleed, which brings us back to the 10 days. Trump's pause in strikes is not a ceasefire. It is a decision point. Every day inside that window, Iran is laying additional mines, repositioning additional missile batteries, and hardening its defensive positions. Every day, inside that window, the United States is moving additional troops, filling ammunition stocks, and running intelligence collection at maximum intensity. Satellite imagery is tracking Iranian military movements with precision measured in meters. Both sides are using the pause. Neither side is standing down. When the clock expires, the outcome splits into two paths. Iran takes a meaningful diplomatic step back, and the window that was closing stays open. Or the United States launches one of the largest ground operations in Middle Eastern history, and everything that's been assembled in the background moves to the foreground simultaneously. The decision to deploy 10,000 additional troops tells you which direction the weight is currently falling. Coalition positioning adds another dimension. The United Kingdom and France are preparing to stand alongside the United States if operations proceed. NATO allies have a direct interest in the security of the Strait of Hormuz, through which a significant portion of European energy imports flows. Direct participation in a ground operation carries enormous political risk across European capitals, where public opposition to Middle Eastern military involvement runs deep. But maritime support, mine clearance, naval escort, air coverage is already being coordinated. HMS Queen Elizabeth is positioned in the Mediterranean. The French carrier Charles de Gaulle is moving toward the region. Even without direct assault participation, these assets extend American air superiority and deepen the maritime security envelope. Time is the variable neither side can fully control. For Iran, every additional day of preparation raises the cost of a US operation. Every mine placed, every battery repositioned, every fortification completed. For the United States, every additional day means more troops in position, more ammunition staged, more intelligence refined. The pressure isn't easing. It's building. And when the 10-day deadline arrives, the tension that's been accumulating across both sides of this standoff either finds a controlled release or it doesn't. The picture emerging from every credible military source points in the same direction. Diplomacy is still technically possible, but the machine being assembled in the Gulf isn't being built for a negotiating table. It's being built for the moment those negotiations end. And right now, every hour that passes, it gets harder to stop.